Alright, today we're replacing the screen on a Dell Inspiron N7010 7010. This computer was unfortunately dropped on an edge and cracked the screen quite well, so we're going to go about replacing it. So first thing we need to do is make sure the computer is shut down. This screen, if you look at it, doesn't have any rubber feet along any of the edges. Most screen covers, these little bezel covers, are held on by screws. This one is just snapped in place. So the first step that we're going to need to do is remove this bezel cover. And you can do that just by using your fingers, getting in underneath the edge of the screen, and just listening to it pop. Be gentle when you do this. Different parts of the screen will hold down, especially down here by the hinges. This computer here also had a little bit of tape up where the camera is, so I heard that pop as well. And that's all it is. Next thing you want to do is make sure you tilt the screen back slightly, so that as we remove the screen, it doesn't fall out on us. There's two screws up here at the top corners that hold the hardware in, hold the brackets in that hold the screen itself. You have two choices when you remove this screen. One is you can remove the screws that hold all of this hardware and then take the screen out. Or two, which I prefer, is to leave the hardware in place and then just remove the screen from the hardware. So we'll remove these two screens first. You'll need a screwdriver with a small Phillips bit. I usually use a Phillips bit 0, PH0 if that makes sense to you. But use a small size bit and it should come right out. If your screwdriver is set correctly. Now once you remove those screws, the screen itself should be somewhat loose. You should be able to move it. This gets you a chance to much more easily reach these screws on the side. This screen has 4 screws on it. Most screens you'll only find 2, maybe 3. Because this last screw is buried so far down, I'm going to actually loosen up these other screws holding the bottom of this bracket. Not take them out, but just loosen them up slightly. So that'll give me a little more room to work. So once you've done that, it should be very easy to access these screws. I usually use my finger as a spacer, and then just go in and remove these screws along the edge. The harder part of this process is always reassembly, because I'm probably going to lose a screw here now. This particular screwdriver I have does not hold its magnetization very well. If you've got a tweezers, you can use those to recover the screws that you may drop. Otherwise, once we get the screen out of here, it'll be very easy to retrieve those screws that are behind the cover. Alright, that's one side done. Now we'll reverse it for the other side. And again, I'm going to loosen these screws on the bottom. Alright, with that we've removed all the screws and the screen itself is loose. Now one thing to be aware of is most of these computers have a video camera up here in the top. There's a cable that comes from this video camera and will drop down right here behind the screen. There is a fair amount of tape, sticky tape, on that cable, so the camera will probably stick to the screen slightly. There it is. Alright, and we just tip this forward. As you see, there's one cable that holds the screen on the computer. And all we need to do, there's a bit of tape here at the top, so we just need to find an edge and lift this tape. And you're going to want to hold down this cover that covers the electronics for the screen. Even though you're not going to need it anymore, there's no sense in ripping it off. And then there's also tape sticky on the back side of this cable, so you need to work the cable loose too. Once it's loose, we should be able to lift this right up, and that's all there is to it. One of the things that we're going to have to be careful with as we put the screen back in is to make sure that this cable is attached where it belongs. It's tucked into a little channel here, which I will try to zoom in on for you. It's tucked in a little channel down below here, so we'll have to keep that in that channel as we reassemble this. So here's our screen, our very broken screen. And if you look at the top of the screen, there is a label. And on this label, we're looking for the part number for this particular screen. This one has the label up here on the top. So our screen is an N17306. So that's the replacement part that we're going to look for. I did receive a replacement part today. This label is slightly different. And as you can see, if I get it in the right place, this is the same type of screen as an N173, and this one is an 06L02. So this is the replacement part for this particular computer. So as you see, also the connector is on the same side as the old connector was, which is very important. Make sure the connector is on the same side as your cable, not on the opposite side of the cable. Most of the screens you'll find should have them on the left here, but you may find one that's on the right. So then all we do is reverse the process. So we will reattach this cable, place the screen back into its frame, run the screws back in, and then we should be done. Now, I did drop one screw before, and I have my handy magnet to get it back out of here. And then I'm ready to put the screen back together. Alright, we're now ready to put our screen back in. The first thing that you're going to want to do is reattach the connector to the bottom of the screen. The connector actually just slides in towards the top of the screen. So we'll do that. You're going to want to keep the tape out of the way so that you don't have to fight it. And once you get it lined up, you should simply slide right in. And you want to make sure that it's in there tight so that there's no space left in the connector. It's a nice gold-plated connector, so it's pretty easy to see when there's space. And then you can simply push the tape back down to hold the connector back in place. Next, we just lift this very carefully into place. As you see, this comes with a protective cover. It should sit right in place just like that. And you want to make sure that if this happened to pop out, the cable here for both the screen and for the video camera popped out in the bottom, you'll just want to make sure that if it's sitting out, you're going to want to tuck that back in. That way when we replace the bezel cover later, it will not get pinched. And now we simply reverse the process that we had before, placing the screws back in one at a time. And the hardest screw to line up is always the first one. Once you get the first one lined up and started and in place, it will make your job much easier. And you don't need to over tighten these screws, they just need to be snug enough to hold this in place. Hopefully your PC is not going to, your laptop is not going to go through a tremendous amount of vibration, so it shouldn't be an issue. Alright, now we've replaced all of the screws along the edge here, all 4 screws. Next we need to replace our screws up at the top here and then make sure we tighten our screws at the bottom that we loosen to make our life a little easier. One of the things you're going to want to watch out for as you tighten these screws up here in the top, the camera has 2 small plastic pins that come through these holes. So you're going to want to make sure that that camera is where it belongs as you tighten the screen up. And again, you're going to want to make sure you tighten up any other screws that you loosened. The last thing to do is to remove any protective film like this one that I've got on here. I've left a little tape behind the screen that won't hurt anything. It's attached to the side of the screen and then hooked on the mounting bracket. And then we'll place the bezel cover, make sure you get the camera hole up. And you should be able to just snap it on just as easily as it snapped off. And that's the completed repair of the screen on the Dell Inspiron N7010 Laptop.